What if I told you that the state of Indiana, often overlooked as just another stretch of farmland and highways in the Midwest, hides a past so dark, so mysterious that it has been buried beneath layers of myths, scandals, and forgotten tragedies? From ancient civilizations that once thrived on its soil, to violent clashes that shaped America's destiny, to unsolved crimes and secrets politicians never wanted you to know, Indiana is not what it seems. Tonight, we are going to peel back the surface and reveal the truths that history books left out. When most people think of Indiana, they imagine basketball, cornfields, and maybe the Indianapolis 500. But behind this everyday image lies a deeper conflict. The struggle between what Indiana was meant to be and what it became. For centuries, the land we now call Indiana was sacred ground for native nations, full of thriving trade networks and spiritual sites. Yet by the early 19th century, it became a contested battlefield for expansion, displacement, and survival. Later, it would be the stage for secret societies, political corruption, and even some of the darkest chapters of American extremism. Indiana's story is not simply about pioneers and settlers building a new home. It's about the clash of cultures, the hidden agendas of powerful men, and the whispers of forgotten tragedies that continue to echo in the shadows of small towns and abandoned landmarks. By the end of this journey, you'll see Indiana in a way you never have before. Not as the crossroads of America, but as a land shaped by hidden origins, unsettling truths, and stories that still haunt its identity. We'll uncover native legends that predate European arrival, expose forgotten political scandals that shaped the nation, and dive into dark events buried deep in its soil. The Indiana you think you know is only the surface. The real Indiana lies beneath. Long before it carried the name Indiana, this land was home to civilizations that left behind traces more mysterious than most Americans realize. The Mississippian culture, who flourished centuries before European arrival, constructed vast earthen mounds across the Midwest. Some of these mounds still stand today in southern Indiana, silent monuments to a people whose spiritual and political systems remain only partly understood. Archaeologists have uncovered artifacts suggesting complex trade routes, stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes, running directly through Indiana's heartland. But with these ancient structures come haunting questions. Who were these people, really? Why did their civilizations vanish? And what rituals were performed in these ceremonial centers? Some believe the mounds were burial grounds, others that they were sacred platforms where leaders ruled, and still others whisper that they were aligned with celestial events, hinting at a knowledge far ahead of its time. When Europeans arrived, they encountered powerful nations like the Miami, Shawnee, and Potawatomi, each with their own legends tied to the rivers and forests of Indiana. To them, this land was not simply territory, it was alive with meaning. The rivers were pathways, the forests were homes, and the earth itself carried stories. But soon, these nations would face an invasion that would forever alter their destiny. The story of Indiana cannot be told without speaking of war and betrayal. In the early 1800s, as the United States pushed westward, Indiana became a flashpoint of resistance. Leaders like Tecumseh and his brother, Tenskwatawa the Prophet, rose to unite native nations in a powerful confederacy. They dreamed of halting the expansion, of protecting their sacred lands from being swallowed by settlers. The heart of this resistance lay in Prophetstown, a settlement in what is now Tippecanoe County. It was more than a village, it was a movement. For years, Prophetstown grew in influence, drawing warriors and families from across the Midwest. But in 1811, everything changed. General William Henry Harrison, then governor of the Indiana Territory, led U.S. forces into battle against Tecumseh's Confederacy. The Battle of Tippecanoe became a turning point. Prophetstown was burned, its dream of unity shattered. Yet the story doesn't end there. Tecumseh himself continued his fight, eventually joining forces with the British during the War of 1812. His vision of a united native America might have changed the course of history, if not for betrayal, broken promises, and overwhelming force. By the time Indiana achieved statehood in 1816, much of the native presence had been forcibly removed, leaving behind only traces of their once powerful civilizations. But Indiana's dark history was only beginning. When Indiana officially became the 19th state of the Union in 1816, it was celebrated as a symbol of American progress, a new land of opportunity carved out of the frontier. But behind the proud speeches and patriotic declarations, the early years of Indiana were riddled with shadows. Political ambition, backroom deals, and quiet corruption shaped the state's destiny more than idealism ever did. The first state capital was not Indianapolis, but Corydon, a small town surrounded by limestone hills and thick woods. There, in a modest limestone building, leaders drafted the state's constitution. But even this document, often praised for its progressive language, carried contradictions. On paper, Indiana outlawed slavery. Yet, loopholes allowed a practice known as indentured servitude to thrive, effectively enslaving hundreds of black men, women, and children under another name. The law said one thing, but the reality told another. Meanwhile, land speculation became a dark undercurrent of Indiana's growth. Wealthy men, many of them connected to politics, used their positions to seize prime tracts of land, selling them at inflated prices to settlers desperate for a foothold. To the pioneers arriving with dreams of freedom and independence, Indiana offered promise. But to the power brokers behind closed doors, it was an opportunity to build dynasties of wealth and control. And then came the question of Indianapolis. Chosen as the new capital in 1820, the city rose almost out of nothing, carved from swampy land in the state's center. The decision wasn't just about geography, it was about power. A centralized capital meant easier control, and those who profited from its construction were the same men who shaped its future. Streets were laid, buildings were planned, but underneath it all ran a current of greed and manipulation. As Indiana grew, so too did its contradictions. A state that promised liberty, yet restricted who could truly claim it. A land that welcomed settlers, yet drove out its original inhabitants. A government that spoke of fairness, yet hid corruption beneath every deal. But this was only the beginning of Indiana's darker secrets. For in the decades to come, the state would not only wrestle with political shadows, it would become a stage for violence, hidden societies, and the rise of movements that would terrify the nation. Before continuing, if this video is interesting and educational, I ask you to like it and subscribe to the channel. That would help me a lot to continue growing and continue uploading more educational content like this.
When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Indiana proudly declared its loyalty to the Union. Thousands of young men rushed to enlist, eager to defend the flag. The state became a vital supplier of troops and resources, sending more than 200,000 soldiers into battle. On the surface, Indiana looked united in its cause. But beneath the patriotic rallies and waving banners, deep cracks were spreading, cracks that threatened to tear the state apart from within. The truth is that not everyone in Indiana wanted war. While northern Indiana leaned toward abolitionist sentiment, southern Indiana, geographically and culturally closer to Kentucky, harbored strong sympathy for the Confederacy. Families were divided, towns split, and neighbors turned against one another. Secret meetings were held in barns and basements, where whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. At the center of this unrest was a clandestine network known as the Sons of Liberty, a secret society accused of plotting against the Union government. They allegedly planned riots, prison breaks, and even assassinations to weaken Indiana's war effort. Some believed their ultimate goal was to establish a Midwestern Confederacy, breaking away from the United States entirely. Governor Oliver P. Morton, a staunch Unionist, knew the danger was real, but determined to crush dissent, he used spies, informants, and even questionable legal tactics to root out the conspiracies. Morton's leadership earned him the title the Soldier's Friend, but it also gave him a darker reputation. He suspended civil liberties, bypassed the legislature, and ruled with an iron hand measures many compared to dictatorship. For Morton, the ends justified the means. For his enemies, Indiana was sliding into tyranny. The climax came in 1864, when Union forces uncovered an alleged plot known as the Northwest Conspiracy. The Sons of Liberty were accused of planning to free thousands of Confederate prisoners held in Indiana and Illinois, arming them to march against the government. The plan failed, but the arrests that followed revealed how fragile Indiana's loyalty truly was. In the end, Indiana remained in the Union. Its soldiers fought bravely in battles from Shiloh to Gettysburg, leaving behind countless graves on distant fields. Yet at home, the war left scars that would linger for generations. Political bitterness, distrust in government, and a legacy of division that never fully healed. But the Civil War was only one chapter of Indiana's troubled story. For in the years that followed, the state would give rise to one of the darkest and most secretive movements in American history, a movement cloaked in robes, fire, and fear.
When most people think of the Ku Klux Klan, their minds turn to the Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia. But in the 1920s, the heart of the Klan's power was not in Dixie, it was in Indiana. This northern state, often seen as ordinary and unassuming, became the unlikely epicenter of one of the darkest chapters in American extremism. The rebirth of the Klan in the early 20th century came during a time of rapid change. Immigrants were pouring into the United States, cities were growing, and Prohibition had turned alcohol into a forbidden currency of crime and corruption. Many white Protestants felt threatened by the cultural shifts, and the Klan offered them something dangerous: a sense of belonging, control, and superiority. In Indiana, that message spread like wildfire. By 1925, the Klan claimed as many as 1 in 3 white men in the state as members, including politicians, ministers, judges, and police officers. Entire towns marched proudly in Klan parades, hoods and robes no longer hidden in secrecy, but displayed in daylight as a show of dominance. At the center of this movement was D.C. Stevenson, the Grand Dragon of Indiana's Klan. Charismatic, ruthless, and ambitious, Stevenson transformed the organization into a political machine. Under his control, the Klan infiltrated every level of state government. Laws were influenced, elections were manipulated, and opposition was crushed. For a brief period, Indiana was not just influenced by the Klan, it was ruled by it. But power built on fear cannot last forever. Stevenson's downfall came not from politics, but from scandal. In 1925, he was arrested for the brutal kidnapping, assault, and death of a young woman named Madge Oberholzer. The case shocked the nation and exposed the corruption and violence festering at the Klan's core. Newspapers splashed the story across their front pages, and the illusion of morality the Klan had hidden behind crumbled overnight. Membership collapsed, politicians fled from association, and Indiana's reign as the Klan's empire began to fade. Yet the damage had already been done. The 1920s left behind a legacy of division and hate, scars that shaped Indiana's communities for decades to come. And while the Klan's influence waned, whispers of its presence never fully disappeared. Indiana's reputation as a quiet Midwestern state would never be the same again. By the time the Ku Klux Klan's grip on Indiana began to fade in the late 1920s, the state was already entangled in another shadowy chapter: organized crime, corruption, and scandals that shook its institutions to the core. Indiana may not have had the notoriety of Chicago or New York, but beneath its calm surface, criminal networks and political machines thrived in ways that few outsiders ever realized. The Prohibition-era was the perfect storm. When the 18th Amendment outlawed alcohol in 1920, Indiana's towns and cities transformed almost overnight. Speakeasies opened in backrooms and basements, bootleggers smuggled liquor along hidden backroads, and corrupt officials turned a blind eye for the right price. For crime bosses, the flat farmlands and endless highways of Indiana offered the ideal smuggling routes. One of the most notorious underworld figures tied to Indiana was none other than John Dillinger, a name that would become legend. Born in Indianapolis in 1903, Dillinger grew up as a restless youth before turning into the Hoosier outlaw. In the 1930s, he and his gang launched a string of daring bank robberies across the Midwest. To the public, he became a folk hero, a rebel, striking back at institutions that many blamed for the Great Depression. But to the authorities, Dillinger was public enemy number one. His connection to Indiana ran deep. He spent time in the Indiana State Prison, where he learned new skills from seasoned criminals. When he escaped, he put those lessons to use, robbing banks with military precision. Crowds sometimes cheered him. Newspapers sensationalized his exploits, but the reality was darker. Bloodshed, fear, and a manhunt that turned Indiana into the epicenter of America's war on crime. But Dillinger was only one thread in a larger tapestry of corruption. Local politicians across Indiana faced accusations of bribery, election fraud, and secret alliances with criminal enterprises. The blending of politics and crime wasn't just rumor, it was reality. Police officers looked the other way, judges handed down suspiciously light sentences, and certain businesses thrived because they had the right connections. Even the justice system itself was not immune. Stories spread of county officials siphoning money, of state leaders manipulating laws for profit, and of scandals so shocking that they could have toppled entire administrations. Yet often, these cases disappeared quietly, buried under influence and silence. Indiana's ordinary image became a mask. Behind the barns and cornfields, in the back alleys of Indianapolis, and the small-town courthouses, a hidden underworld shaped the state just as much as its official history. But Indiana's secrets didn't stop with crime and corruption. For even deeper in its soil lie mysteries, enigmatic sites, ghostly legends, and places where the line between history and folklore blurs. Beneath Indiana's farms, rivers, and quiet towns lies a haunting truth. The past never really disappears. Stories of restless spirits, cursed grounds, and unexplained phenomena echo across the state, passed down through generations as both warnings and whispers of what lingers in the shadows. One of the most chilling tales comes from the Steppe Cemetery, a small, desolate burial ground tucked deep in the Morgan Monroe State Forest. Locals tell of a grieving woman dressed in black, seen wandering among the tombstones at night. Known as the Black Lady, she is said to be searching for the graves of her children, forever mourning in the moonlight. Visitors report cold gusts of air, faint cries in the distance, and a feeling of being watched. Whether legend or truth, Steppe Cemetery has become a magnet for those drawn to the supernatural. Then there is the French Lick Springs Hotel, a grand resort with a glamorous history but a darker reputation. Guests and employees have told stories of ghostly apparitions roaming the hallways, phantom footsteps echoing in empty rooms, and the unsettling sensation of being followed. Some say the spirits are remnants of the hotel's gambling past. Others believe they are victims of deals made in the shadows during its Prohibition-era heyday. But perhaps the most infamous site is the abandoned Central State Hospital in Indianapolis. Once known as the Indiana Hospital for the Insane, it opened in 1848 and quickly became a place of nightmares. Patients suffered under inhumane treatments, overcrowding, and neglect. Whispers of cruel experiments and deaths, hidden in official records, fed its sinister reputation. Today, even after most of the original buildings have been demolished, the land is said to remain haunted. Shadowy figures, unexplained voices, and chilling presences are reported by those who dare to explore its ruins. Folklore also points to the rivers themselves as haunted veins running through the land. Along the banks of the Ohio River, ghost lights and strange mists have been spotted for centuries, often connected to tales of drowned travelers or lost native warriors. In the small towns scattered across southern Indiana, nearly every community has its own legend: phantom trains, spectral children, or houses where no family stays for long. These ghost stories are not just entertainment. They are the echoes of real pain, tragedies, and violence embedded in Indiana's soil. They remind us that beneath the surface of ordinary life, history continues to whisper. And sometimes it refuses to stay buried. But if Indiana's haunted places tell us about the spirits of the past, its legends of lost civilizations and hidden mysteries point to something even deeper: secrets that challenge our understanding of who lived here before us and what they left behind. Before continuing, if this video is interesting and educational, I ask you to like it and subscribe to the channel. That would help me a lot to continue growing and continue uploading more educational content like this. Long before the founding of Indiana, before Europeans set foot on its rivers and forests, this land carried secrets of civilizations whose stories remain only half told. Beneath the cornfields and quiet towns lie traces of ancient peoples who built, worshipped, and vanished, leaving behind mysteries that still haunt archaeologists today. One of the most enduring enigmas comes from the Hopewell and Adana cultures, who lived across the Midwest nearly 2,000 years ago. These mound-building societies constructed elaborate earthworks, massive geometric shapes carved into the land, some aligning with celestial patterns. Southern Indiana still holds remnants of these sacred sites, though many have been destroyed by farming and development. What were they? Burial grounds? Ceremonial temples? Astronomical calendars? The answers are hidden in fragments, but the precision of their designs suggests a knowledge far beyond what many believe ancient cultures possessed. Even more unsettling are the whispers of what early settlers claimed to find. In the 19th century, reports spread of giant skeletons unearthed from burial mounds across Indiana and the Ohio Valley. Newspapers of the time sensationalized the discoveries, describing massive bones and skulls too large to be human. Some speculated that Indiana was once home to a lost race of giants mentioned in native oral traditions. Others dismissed it as myth, exaggeration, or misinterpretation. But the legends persist, fueling speculation about what truly lies buried beneath the Hoosier soil. The rivers, too, hold their mysteries. Along the banks of the Wabash and White Rivers, artifacts have been uncovered suggesting vast trade networks stretching hundreds of miles. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains all found their way into Indiana's heartland long before modern highways existed. Was this simply commerce or evidence of a forgotten civilization that bound the continent together? Native stories add another layer. The Miami and Shawnee people spoke of ancient battles fought across these lands, of sacred places imbued with power, and of spirits that guarded the earthworks. To them, the mounds were not just relics, they were living reminders of ancestors and cosmic order. When settlers destroyed or looted them, it was more than disrespect. It was the silencing of voices that had endured for centuries. Today, many of these ancient mysteries remain unsolved. Archaeologists dig, historians debate, but the land keeps its secrets close. The questions linger. Who truly lived here? What knowledge did they hold? And why did their civilizations disappear? Indiana's soil is a graveyard of forgotten histories, and with every construction project or plowed field, pieces of that past are erased forever. But while some secrets lie buried in silence, others have exploded into public view modern disasters, political cover-ups, and tragedies that expose the darker side of Indiana's recent history. For all its farmland tranquility and Midwestern charm, Indiana has endured tragedies that scarred entire generations. Some accidents of fate, others the result of corruption, negligence, and cover-ups that left communities searching for answers. These are not just disasters of nature or machinery, but moments when truth itself was buried, leaving only shadows and suspicion. One of the darkest days in Indiana's history came on October 31, 1963, in Indianapolis. The city's Catholic community gathered for a massive Halloween celebration at the Indiana State Fairgrounds Coliseum. But as the night unfolded, a propane tank beneath the bleachers began to leak. At 11 p.m., it ignited in a deafening explosion that ripped through the building. In an instant, the festive arena became a nightmare. 81 people were killed and nearly 400 injured. The Coliseum explosion remains one of the deadliest disasters in Indiana's history. Investigations revealed gross negligence in the handling of gas lines, but accountability was scarce. For decades, survivors and families would whisper about how much was hidden, how much blame was quietly erased. Then there was Flight 710 of Delta Airlines, which fell from the sky over Tell City, Indiana. In 1960, the plane disintegrated mid-air, killing all 63 aboard. The crash shocked the nation, but the investigation's conclusion, structural failure of the engine, did little to satisfy locals who swore they had seen military aircraft in the area. Was it simply an accident or something more? Official reports closed the case, but doubt still lingers. And then, the Indiana State Fair tragedy of 2011. During a summer concert by the band Sugarland, strong winds ripped through the fairgrounds. The stage's metal scaffolding collapsed onto the crowd, killing 7 and injuring dozens. Once again, investigations uncovered negligence. Corners had been cut in construction, warnings ignored. Lawsuits followed, but for many survivors, it felt like history repeating itself, a state willing to move forward quickly, burying mistakes instead of truly confronting them. But disasters in Indiana haven't only been mechanical or accidental, they've also been environmental. Towns like Tynes Beach, Missouri are often remembered for chemical contamination, but Indiana has its own toxic scars. In places like East Chicago, families lived for decades on land poisoned with lead and arsenic, the remnants of forgotten industrial plants. Children grew up sick, entire neighborhoods were declared unsafe, yet the warnings had been buried for years. Corporations profited, while the truth seeped into the very soil. And perhaps most haunting are the tragedies that never made national headlines, the small-town factory fires, the coal mine collapses, the school bus accidents that left deep wounds on local communities, but were quickly forgotten by the outside world. In Indiana, memory often fades faster than justice. These disasters and cover-ups reveal a truth that runs through Indiana's history. Beneath the image of stability lies fragility, and beneath the official reports lies silence. But silence can never last forever. Because if Indiana is a land of disasters and cover-ups, it is also a land where secrets resurface, sometimes through investigation, sometimes through legend, and sometimes through blood. If Indiana's history has been marked by corruption, disasters, and hidden societies, its criminal past has also carved scars on the state's identity. Some crimes were so brutal, so disturbing, that they became infamous nationwide, turning Indiana into a stage for horror that seemed to defy imagination. One of the most chilling cases was that of Gertrude Banishevsky and the torture of Sylvia Likens in 1965. Sylvia, a 16-year-old girl left in Banishevsky's care, endured weeks of unimaginable abuse inside a modest Indianapolis home. Neighbors ignored the screams. Children participated in the torment, and by the time Sylvia died, the crime was so heinous that it became known as the most terrible crime ever committed in the state of Indiana. The case revealed not just the cruelty of one woman, but the darkness that can lurk inside ordinary communities. Decades earlier, Indiana was already no stranger to infamy. The Fox Hollow Farm murders in the 1990s shocked the state when investigators uncovered the remains of at least 11 men on the property of Herb Baumeister, a wealthy businessman with a secret life as a predator. For years, Baumeister lured victims from Indianapolis into his home, hiding bodies on his land while maintaining the image of a successful family man. His death by suicide cut short the chance for full justice, leaving many questions unanswered and families without closure. Even small towns carried their own grim legends. In Richmond, the 1971 explosion in the downtown area killed 41 people, an event tied not only to tragedy, but also to allegations of negligence and ignored safety warnings. In other corners of the state, unsolved murders, missing persons cases, and whispered rumors of cover-ups have left shadows that refuse to fade. From the gruesome to the mysterious, Indiana's crimes reveal a paradox. The state, often seen as a calm, wholesome slice of America, has also been the backdrop for some of its darkest nightmares. Indiana is called the crossroads of America. To travelers, it may be just highways, farmlands, and cities that blur together as they pass through. But when we peel back the surface, we find something much deeper. A land shaped by ancient civilizations and erased histories, by wars and betrayals, by corruption, by disasters, by hate, and by crimes so chilling they defy comprehension. Every state has its secrets, but Indiana's lie in plain sight, hidden in small towns, in forgotten ruins, in the cracks of official records, and in stories passed down as whispers. To know Indiana is to understand that darkness and light coexist here, that history is never as clean as textbooks suggest, and that the land itself remembers what people try to forget. The next time you drive through Indiana, past the cornfields and quiet towns, remember, you're not just crossing the heartland of America. You're traveling across ground, layered with mystery, tragedy, and secrets that will never truly stay buried. This is Indiana, its history, its origins, and its secrets you are never meant to know.